It's Tuesday, so it's time for another top 10 video. This time it's going to be my top 10 non-concentration buff spells. This was the runner-up to last week's top 10 Tuesday poll that my patrons voted on. It only lost by 1 vote, so I figured let's make it come out. So if you want to see what my top 10 spells that you can use to buff up your character that do not require concentration, stay tuned. I guess that means I'm going to buff you up. It's like 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm sorry, guys. What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and let's just dive into the rules. Not too many here. I pretty much explained it up front. It needs to be a spell. It needs to provide some sort of buff or boon to your character in some way, and it has to be non-concentration. That's pretty much it. Let's get on with the video. Oh, just real quick before number 10, do me a favor and take a look at my video description. I redid the entire layout of it, and I want to see what you all think. I think it reads a little cleaner now. Let me know in the comments. Number 10. Number 10 is Darkvision. I put this as number 10 because I recognize its usefulness, but I've never actually taken this spell because more often than not, either the entire party has had Darkvision or they haven't, so it's never been an issue. But it's a 2nd level spell, and I didn't realize the duration was so long. It provides a creature that you touch. It has to be a willing creature, but I mean, again, why wouldn't you be? To give you dark vision of a range of 60 feet for 8 hours. I did not realize it was 8 hours, which is pretty nuts. I guess the only real downside to this spell is the spell list that it's on, right? It's Druid, Ranger, Sorcerer, Wizard, Artificer, so therefore not accessible by Clerics, Bards, or Warlocks for some reason, which seems a little out of place to me if Sorcerers and Wizards have it. But yeah, I mean, again, the material component is non-costly. And, you know, the only other downside, too, I'd say, is that you can't upcast it to provide it to multiple. I feel like that seems like a no-brainer, right? If you cast it at a 3rd level, you could provide it to 2 characters. But maybe because it's not concentration, they want to have you cast the spell multiple times rather than upcasting it to hit 2 creatures. Seems, again, you're kind of doing the same thing, right? If you cast it twice, it's 2 2nd level spells, or you could cast it with a 2nd and 3rd level slot to give it to 2 creatures. I don't know. But again, there's never a scenario where you're like, man, I really wish I had Darkvision and someone has a spell that can give it to me, and I don't. I also feel like it's potentially not a bad investment, especially like if you're traveling during the day and you're like, oh, we're going to go into this dark cave, or it's going to be nighttime. Maybe I'll give myself Darkvision for 8 hours and then wait it out. This is also something I feel like it could be very useful in scroll form. If you are any one of those classes and you can just stock up on scrolls of Darkvision to provide to yourself or to other party members, this would be very useful. Number 9. Number 9 is Aid, and I've never really used this spell personally, but I've had it cast in parties that I was in, and it's surprising how much that 5 extra hit points can do. So it is 1 action. It lasts 8 hours. I think almost all of the spells on this list are in the basic rules of the player's handbook. This is accessible by Clerics and Paladins and Artificers. And you choose up to 3 creatures. Each target's hit point maximum increases by 5, and their current hit point increases by 5. So what it means, let's say your maximum hit points are 50. Your maximum hit points for the next 8 hours are now 55. And if you were at max hit points was 50, it'll jump up to 55. But what that means is if throughout the course of this 8 hours you take damage, you can be healed up to 55 hit points. So it's increasing that. And if you cast it out of a 3rd level slot or higher, it increases that hit point maximum amount by 5 for each level above 2nd. So if you cast it out of a 3rd level slot, those 3 creatures that you choose get 10 extra hit points. And when you think about this compared to Darkvision, which I just went over, this is a 2nd level spell that for 8 hours gives everybody extra hit points. And we can't even upcast Darkvision to give multiple people Darkvision, which just, I feel like this is a stronger spell. Again, significantly limited spell list, right? Only really the kind of Healy type classes. But either way, I really like this spell. It also is nice that it's not touch. It's a range of 30 feet, so you can do this mid-combat and get multiple people. It's also, because it's non-concentration, something that you can put up ahead of combat, or maybe if you're like, oh, well, we're going to go to sleep and get 8 hours rest before I go to sleep tonight, let me just cast aid on the 3 of us or 3 people just in case something happens while we're sleeping. If not, then I'll wake up refreshed and get the spell slot back anyway. Like I said, it's usually not a spell that I take personally, but maybe I'll start doing it. I've had it cast on me, and it has been very beneficial. Number 8. Number 8 is Nondetection. Again, this is a 3rd level spell for an action. Once again, we have our 8-hour duration. Usable by bards, rangers, wizards, knowledge domain, clerics. And again, I'm not going to really go over the Unearthed Arcana, what classes get it through that, because it doesn't really apply it to anything yet. This does have a costly material component of a pinch of diamond dust worth 25 gold pieces sprinkled over the target, which is consumed by the spell. But for that 8-hour duration, you're hidden from divination magic. The target can be a willing creature or be placed on an object no larger than 10 feet in any dimension. The target can't be targeted by any divination magic or perceived through any magical scrying sensors. So what's really interesting is if you cast non-detection on yourself or on someone could, like an enemy or whoever else, could still scry on the location and see the rest of the party, but not the person that you've cast non-detection on or yourself. It's good if you don't have access to a proof of amulet versus detection and location, if you're trying to hide somebody consistently. The only downside is it is only 8 hours, so you'll have to continually keep this 3rd level spell up if you're that worried that someone's gonna find you. Additionally, I guess bonus points if you happen to be a Svirfneblin gnome and take the Svirfneblin magic feat. You can cast non-detection on yourself only at will without needing material components, so that's pretty cool. Again, there's definitely been scenarios where I've looked at casting this spell on myself or someone else or an object. Again, I've never really done it, but I recognize how useful it is to be hidden from divination magic. Number 7. Now, number 7, I do have some history with, and I can speak to its usefulness. So this is a 4th level spell, is Fire Shield. It's an action to cast, but its duration is only 10 minutes. Again, a significantly more combat-oriented spell. Thin and wispy flames wreathe your body. You shed bright light in 10-foot radius and dim light in another 10 feet. So you're going to be noticeable regardless, but that could be useful depending on the scenario you're in. And you can choose. The flames provide you with a warm shield or a chill shield. The warm shield gives you cold resistance. The chill shield gives you fire resistance. And in addition, whenever a creature within 5 feet of you hits you with a melee attack, the shield erupts with flame. They take 2d8 fire damage from the warm shield or 2d8 cold damage from the cold shield. So this is usable by the wizard, the fiend, and the Battlesmith Artificer. Again, there are several UA classes, but we're not going to cover those. And yeah, as a Blade Singer, this is a super useful spell because you're going to find yourself, potentially, depending on how you run your Blade Singer, in melee quite a bit. So the fact that this can give you resistance to a very common damage type in either cold or fire, and then again, if you're going to be in melee stabbing people, the only downside is this is if they hit you within 5 feet. So if there's someone that has a reach, like a larger creature, a giant or something with extended reach, or someone with a polearm weapon, then that's going to negate this, but the resistance will still remain. And I feel like retributive damage there's not too many ways to do that in 5th edition. By that I mean damage where you are impacted, you're attacked, hit, something like that, and then you are able to in turn deal damage back to the enemy. There's not too many ways to do that in 5th edition, but it is very useful, especially if it's a consistent thing, right? Like if a creature has multi-attack and they're hitting you 3 times and they're going to take 2d8 cold or fire damage 3 times, they're probably going to think twice before they come over and keep hitting you again. So there's definitely a benefit to this. And again, another situation where the only downside is you're limited in the spells and who has access to this. This might be something interesting for a bard to take through magical secrets, and then you can potentially do some cheesy stuff, you know, depending on what other spells you take. So it could be pretty fun. I might actually look into taking this as a bard. But yeah, I also really like it a lot. Just, again, my list, personal opinion.
Number 6.
Number 6 is True Seeing. Again, another spell contained in the basic rules. A 6th level spell, 1 action, duration of 1 hour. This does have a costly material component. It needs an ointment for the eyes that costs 25 gold pieces. I'm not sure if the ointment is consumed by the spell. It's kind of hard to tell based on that, but something is consumed for the spell. But it will give a willing creature that you touch True Sight. They have True Sight. They can notice doors hidden by magic and can see into the ethereal plane out to 120 feet. And as a reminder, True Sight is and see in normal and magical darkness, see invisible creatures and objects, automatically detect visual illusions and succeed on saving throws against them, perceive the original form of a shape changer or a creature that is transformed by magic, and see into the ethereal plane. So True Seeing gives you True Sight and then also talks about secret doors hidden by magic, so it gives you a little bit more than just having innate True Sight. It is 1 hour. It is a 6th level spell, but it is very powerful, and it's got a pretty substantial list, right? Bard, Cleric, Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard. Not sure why Druid is the only full caster left out of that list, but they are for some reason. I do think that is always interesting to me to see who is left out of, like, we're going to give this to every full caster except for Druids for some reason. I don't know. Again, it's super useful. It'll help you see through most things. And if you have access to it, it's usually never a bad thing, though there may be better 6th level spells out there for you.
Number 5.
Number 5 is Contingency, and I honestly considered this being number 1, but there are some better spells because of that, and it is limited to the fact that only wizards can cast this spell. But my god, the stuff you can do with Contingency. So for those of you who don't know, it is a 6th level spell. It does take 10 minutes to cast, and the duration is 10 days. It also does have a costly material component in a statuette of yourself carved from ivory and decorated with gems worth at least 1,500 gold pieces. However, that is not consumed by the spell, which is nice. So this can be a chain of all sorts of weird, funky stuff, but I'll give you a couple examples, right? So choose a 5th level spell or lower that you can cast that has a casting time of 1 action and that can target you. You cast the spell, called the Contingent spell, as part of the casting of Contingency. You expend both spell slots, the 6th level Contingency spell and whatever the 5th level or lower Contingent spell is. But it doesn't come into effect. Instead, it comes into effect when your qualifier trigger of Contingency occurs. You describe the circumstances that when you cast the 2 spells. And they give an example here. For example, a Contingency cast with water breathing might stipulate that water breathing comes into effect when you are engulfed in water or a similar liquid. So you would have cast water breathing, which is a 2nd level spell? 3rd level spell, and Contingency at some point within the past 10 days. And if within that 10-day period you find yourself immersed in water, you then immediately cast your water breathing on yourself. It just happens. Another benefit of Contingency is you cast the spell and you cast Contingency and the contingent spell, and then you could, in theory, get a long rest and get those 2 spell slots back. And now that is kind of up on you in the background, and then at some point down the road, it might go off. If it takes immediate effect after the circumstances is met for the first time, whether or not you want it to, it just happens. It takes effect only on you, even if the spell could normally affect multiple creatures. For example, water breathing, I think, can function on up to 10 creatures. So water breathing would only be cast on you. You can only use 1 Contingency spell at a time. If you cast this spell again, the effect of another Contingency spell ends on you. Also, Contingency ends on you if its material component is ever not on your person. So, again, there's all sorts of crazy stuff you could do with this, right? Like, you could be... and it also has, certain metagaming points to it. Like, if I ever get down to 10 hit points, I cast greater invisibility on myself. You know what I mean? Something like that. So as soon as you drop below 10 hit points, greater invisibility automatically casts on you, and now you're concentrating on greater invisibility. Something else I haven't really considered with this spell is if you're already concentrating on a spell and you have a contingent spell up that also requires concentration, I assume it just overrides the pre-existing the pre-existing spell. But I mean, this is only usable by wizards, but this is the entire wizard's 5th level and lower spell slot list of 1-action spells. So I'm sure you can think of a ton of options, right? You could say like, oh, if I ever I'm almost, and the only tricky part is like when the trigger is met, it happens immediately. So I don't know if you can be like, when I hit 0 hit points, it happens, because like, are you technically I guess it works, right? Because the contingent spell magic exists in the world. So if you're like, whenever I hit 0 hit points, I dimension door 500 feet away from the enemy, on a horizontal plane away from the enemy. So in theory, if you did hit 0 hit points, you would teleport 500 feet, because you don't have to be conscious for that to happen. The contingent spell already exists in the world. So there are ways for you, like, I guess, like, for example, my greater invisibility example, you would cast it and then it would immediately end because you're unconscious and can't maintain concentration on it. But, like, again, there are a ton of options, as I'm sure you can think of if you go through that list. So the versatility alone is why this is on number 5.
Number 4.
Number 4 is Mirror Image, because this 2nd level spell is almost never not useful. The only time you run into issues with Mirror Image being not useful is if the creature has some means of seeing through illusionary things. But I'd say for the most part, you'll get this spell at 2nd level, as a 2nd level spell at 3rd level, and it will almost always be useful for the entirety of the campaign. So it is a 1-action casting time, a 1-minute duration, and it basically generates illusory duplicates of yourself. You create 3 duplicates, and you can use, I didn't realize you can use an action to dismiss them, but you can. Each time a creature targets you with an attack during the spell's duration, roll a d20, to determine whether the attack targets you or a duplicate. If you have 3 duplicates, you must roll a 6 or higher to change the attack's target to a duplicate. With 2 duplicates, it's got to be 8 or higher, and with 1 duplicate, it's 11 or higher. A duplicate's AC is 10 plus your dexterity modifier, and if an attack hits the duplicate, it is destroyed. A duplicate can be destroyed only by an attack that hits it. It ignores all other damage and effects. All right, if a fireball goes off on you, the duplicates are not affected by the fireball. The spell ends when all 3 duplicates are destroyed. A creature is unaffected if it can't see, it relies on senses other than sight, such as blind sight, or it can perceive illusions as false, as with true sight. So there, again, blind sight and true sight are ways to get around mirror image, but not a ton of creatures have access to those. Some do, but, this can be useful. I mean, this also works on ranged attacks as well. It doesn't have to be an attack within 5 feet or a melee attack. It's just whenever someone tries to attack it. So this works for spell attacks as well, right? Something like a firebolt or any kind of higher level spell attack. What's also interesting is it says if you have 3 duplicates, you must roll a 6 or higher to change the attack's target to a duplicate. Okay, so you don't get to. It's the way it was worded. It sounded like you might be able to choose. But yeah, it sounds like it just happens every time. But what's also interesting is if you have a very high AC or the attack roll isn't that great, like in theory they could try to attack and then you roll and it hits one of the duplicates. But like, let's say you have a 20 dexterity, so the duplicate's AC is 15. They might still miss when they go to hit the duplicate, or even funnier, if they go to actually hit you instead, and then they hit you, but your AC is higher than their attack roll anyway, so it still misses, and you still maintain your duplicates. Again, the only real downside, once again, is the list of the spell list, right? Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard, and Trickery, Domain, Cleric. I think in the Unearthed Arcana variant class feature one, they gave it to Bards as well. Again, a useful spell for Bards to not have to spend a magical secrets on it. Again, as someone playing a Blade Singer and who has played one very shortly in the past, this combined with all of your other crazy... The fact that you can keep this, Mirror Image, Fire Shield, Haste, and Blade Song all up at the same time is pretty crazy, just the amount of survivability you'd have.
Number 3.
Number 3 is Mind Blank. The reason this is not higher up on the list, I guess, is because it's an 8th level spell, but it is very powerful, and it's something that's typically used by higher level mage enemies in like the monster manual and things. It is a 1-action casting time. It lasts for 24 hours, available to bards and wizards. Until the spell ends, after your 24-hour durations, a 1 willing creature you touch, which is more often than not, in that case, the caster, but not always, they are immune to psychic damage, any effect that would sense their emotions or read their thoughts, divination spells, and the charmed condition. The spell even foils wish spells and spells of similar power to use to affect the target's mind or gain information on the target. So this 8th level spell can foil wish if they're trying to affect their mind or find information about them. It's typically a common thing for a wizard to have this. I think it'd be really cool to just be able to avoid all psychic damage, plus charmed and all these other things. It's just a really nice, powerful spell, and it does feel fitting for like a high level mage to have this ability to protect their mind, as that's kind of their major weapon. Again, interesting that it's bard and wizard. I feel like sorcerer could have access to this spell and it wouldn't be crazy. I don't know. I do sometimes question the options, like I said, which characters get what spells.
Number 2.
Number 2 is Hero's Feast, and I'll be honest, this one was also a contender for number 1, because this is a 10-minute casting time, instantaneous duration, 6th level spell, accessible by clerics and druids, and it just does so much for what it is. It does, however, have a costly material component of a gem-encrusted bowl worth 1,000 gold pieces that is consumed by the spell. But the feast takes 1 hour to consume and disappears at the end of that. And the benefits don't set in until the feast is over. Up to 12 individuals can partake in the feast, and they are cured of all diseases and poisons. They become immune to poison and the frightened condition. They make all wisdom saving throws with advantage, and their hit point maximum increases by 2d10, and so does their current hit points for 24 hours. So kind of similar to how Aid increases your maximum hit points by 5, and then, your current hit points by 5. This does that, except it increases it by 2d10. Also, this would stack with Aid. So you could just continue to buff up your current maximum hit points by using Hero's Feast and Aid. And I should point out that pretty much all of these spells that I've talked about thus far, I'm assuming you have the right mix of characters and classes in your party. In theory, one character could have all of these benefits on them at the same time.
Number 1.
Before I get to number 1, I just wanted to talk about a couple honorable mentions that didn't really make it onto this list. Obviously, Mage Armor is one I'm sure everybody's been talking about thus far, because they're like, why is Mage Armor not on the list? I don't really like Mage Armor, if I'm being honest with you, so that's why it's not on here. Sanctuary, also a good one. Blink, a lot of people like Blink. I don't like the randomness of whether I'm going to be or not be in this plane of existence. Obviously, Water Breathing, Water Walk. I think Tongues probably counts as a buff spell, because being able to speak every language is useful. And then I don't know if I said Sanctuary yet, but Sanctuary also. So that means that number 1 is Foresight. I felt a little weird about putting a 9th level spell as the first, as the number 1 on this list, but it's so good, it kind of just makes sense, right? Its casting time is 1 minute, its duration is 8 hours, and you touch a willing creature and bestow limited ability to see the immediate future. For the duration, the target can't be surprised and has advantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws. Additionally, other creatures have disadvantage on attack rolls against the creature for the duration. So, first of all, constant advantage on attack rolls, ability checks, and saving throws roughly equates to a +5 on all of those abilities. As a matter of fact, that's how it's treated for passive checks. So for any passive-based checks you'd need to make, you have a +5 on all of those. All creatures have disadvantage on attack rolls against you. And this is for 8 hours. So this is something, I'm not going to say this can completely shut down a martial character, but it's pretty good, right? So it's usable by bards, druids, warlocks, and wizards. So don't forget that this, I mean, you are going to be spending your 9th level spell to be doing this, but all of the other abilities you could have that could be on at the same time. The quintessential example is the Moon Druid who shapeshifts into something while having Foresight on themselves. They're now in animal form with their basically nigh unlimited pool of hit points, and they also have advantage on all attacks, ability checks, and saving throws, and attacks against them have disadvantage. I've never played a game to a high enough level to be able to use Foresight. I would greatly like to do so. Also, why do Cleric and Sorcerers not have access to this spell? So, that's it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your top 10 non-concentration spells in the comments down below. Thank you once again to my patrons over on Patreon for continuing to support me. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I would greatly appreciate it if you did so. And I will see you all next time.